Welcome, everyone. I'm Jennifer Widom. I'm the Dean of the School of Engineering. I'm really pleased to have you all here. I hope you're enjoying being back on campus. Sorry about the weather, but it looks like it's getting better. And we're all grateful for rain anyway. So I'm super happy to host this program. One of our goals in the School of Engineering is to deepen the connections we have with other schools and programs on campus. And I think one of the ways we can do this is to bring arts together with the engineering and sciences. And so today we're talking about our new outdoor art piece. It's called Pars Pro Toto by the artist Alicja Kwade, and I really think this helped accomplish our goals of bringing the arts together with science and engineering in a few different ways. First of all, the process that brought us this piece brought together a really nice, diverse committee of incredibly thoughtful students, faculty, and staff from throughout the university. You're going to hear from some of them today. And that committee came together, they canvassed the community, they reviewed proposals, and ultimately selected the work that we have outdoors now. And the work itself highlights links between science and engineering and society at large. And lastly, the piece really is drawing people from across the campus and from across the community to see it and bringing many more people into our space than would otherwise be here. Personally, I really like how the art interacts with the space. And what I really like is actually how everyone has their own way of interacting with the piece. So sometimes when I want to break from my office, I will just go outside and watch how people approach the spheres, how they touch them, how they enjoy them. So I would say when I've talked with the artist, with the generous donor who funded the project, just our community, a lot of people talk about how the piece actually completely changed the experience of the quad, and I agree with that. So if you haven't been there already, I'm sure after this presentation, after our reception, you'll go see for yourself. I wanted to just briefly mention the installation of the spheres. That was an engineering feat in itself. Just as I now like to watch people interact with the spheres, when the piece was being installed, they were trucks and a gigantic crane. I actually brought a bag lunch every day and watched the show. And I have to say, in the middle of that pandemic, that was one of the most gratifying weeks of the pandemic for me, was to come here and eat my lunch and watch that piece going in. So after our program today, the project engineer, Carla Traynor-Smith, and the facilities manager, Jamie Aridia, will be standing by these posters to answer questions related to the installation. I think they'll be wearing hard hats, so you'll recognize them. So let me go ahead and introduce the rest of the program today. First, you're going to hear from Donald Lowe. He's the Max Tanaka Professor in Earth Sciences. So Don came into this project a little later, but his extraordinary expertise in geology and his research on behalf of the project has helped us understand the fascinating science behind the different stones used for the spheres, and it's really added a whole new dimension to the art piece to have his expertise. Following hearing from Don, we'll be joined by Amy Larimer, who's a lecturer and assistant director of the Architectural Design Program in our Department of Civil and Environmental Engineering. Amy was a member of the selection committee, and she's going to lead a discussion with two recent alumni who were students on the selection committee at the time. We have Sophia Pink, who is a bachelor's in 2019 in mechanical engineering and a master's in 2020 in MS&E. And Ann Tanaka, who is a bachelor's in 2019 in civil and environmental engineering. So thank you again for being here this afternoon. I hope to meet all of you during our reception, of course, walking around the spheres, and please join me in welcoming the rest of our speakers.
Thank you very much, Dean Widom. Well, I hope that everyone is enjoying campus today, managed to stay clear of the rain that has been on and off again. It's especially nice to see so many people out and about looking at these lovely spheres. These are truly an incredible addition to Stanford's cultural landscape. As fully appreciated by the artist, Alicja Kwade, Pars Pro Toto is not just eye candy for those strolling through the science and engineering quad, but also a unique display of science, geology, and Earth history. I would emphasize that I'm a geologist, not an engineer. If I wear my name tag over to our Earth Sciences reception this afternoon, I'll probably be run out of town. It says engineering on it, and I'm an earth scientist. But it's been really a pleasure to interact with all of the engineers and the people I've dealt with in this project. Before this pandemic, I spent much of my time beating on rocks in foreign lands with hammers and trying to understand what they can tell us about the evolution of our planet. It was therefore really exciting for me to find some of the lovely rocks appearing on our very campus, and lovely rocks that have a history of their own. And I got the pleasure of researching and unlocking some of that history and trying to make it available to you all. Like many geologists, I got into geology because of the historical aspect of our science. It is really only one of two ways that we can look directly back into the very distant past. We can look at outcrops of rocks, which are rather small things. They provide a finely detailed picture of a small part of Earth history. We can see ripples rolling across a beach in some landscape literally billions of years ago. The other way is cosmology, the other science that allows us to look into the distant past. It provides a very broad but low resolution picture of the universe. So there are two very different ways of looking into the ancient past and really seeing what was going on. Geologists see these spheres not only as lovely artistic creations, but also as pieces, snippets, if you will, of Earth's very long and complex history. Each stone is a record. I like to call them books, written in a foreign language. It's one of my lifetime efforts has been trying to understand that language and be able to read it. And they tell stories of very specific events, each sphere, on or in the Earth at a very specific location at a very specific time. And these time intervals are usually quite narrow. So we have to put together many, many different snippets and books and what would be spheres to put together an understanding of Earth history. Collectively, the pars pro toto spheres reflect events spanning nearly 3,000 million years, or 3 billion years, of Earth history. The oldest rocks in the spheres formed about 3 billion years ago, more than halfway back to the formation of our planet. They reflect volcanism and sedimentation, followed by burial, intrusion, and a variety of what must have been wrenching metamorphic and magmatic events. It is part of a vast terrain that represents the oldest continental crust of India. Other spheres tell us about the formation of the continental crust in Scandinavia, shallow seas and sands on beaches developed in what is now Brazil 800 million years ago that left sediments that have been transformed into the beautiful blue quartzite. Glacial events and deposits in India 750 million years ago when the Earth was enveloped in ice, what is commonly called the snowball Earth. And the deposition of fine white lime muds in shallow seas a mere 100 million years ago, the age of the youngest rock in the spheres, one of which Michelangelo later, 100 million years later, chose to carve two of his most famous sculptures, La Pieta and David. All attest to the long and complex history of sedimentation, volcanism, changing atmospheric composition, past climates, yada, 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 that have characterized the development of the Earth over time. The lovely rounded forms and varied colors of Alicia's spheres stand in some contrast to the right angles, straight lines, and muted colors of the Science and Engineering Quad. I really urge all of you to get a hold of your friends, go online or right here at the back and pick up the descriptions of these spheres and enjoy their geologic as well as aesthetic beauty. In the case of geology, you really can't tell the players without a program. So you want to make sure you pick up one of the little handouts that explain what each sphere means. They're written in terms that I think the everyday person can understand. There's another version of this online that is for the geologic specialist. And unless you're a geologist, you don't want to mess around with that. It's so full of jargon and terms that it'll turn anyone off. These spheres are wonderful new additions to Stanford's environment and will be appreciated by students, faculty, and visitors, I'm sure, for many years to come. I know many of us in geology are just elated to have them here. I can assure you we will probably make more use of them than the engineers. I will be happy to answer any questions about these spheres and Earth history and what they tell us after these presentations. Now let me turn the microphone over to Amy, Ann, and Sophie to tell us a little bit more about the engineering and installation. Thank you very much.
Hi, everyone. Okay, good. I want to say thank you so much for the really kind introduction and for having us here today. And I really want to extend a warm welcome to everyone. And on behalf of Ann and Sophia, who you all get to meet in just a moment, I want to thank you all for joining us for this really special conversation about Pars Pro Toto, this amazing work of art we all get to appreciate now. My name is Amy Larimer. I'm the Assistant Director of the Architectural Design Program in Stanford Engineering and a resident fellow here on campus in an all-frost dorm. I'm grateful every day to get to live on campus and be immersed and connected to a variety of student communities. And I feel so strongly that art is essential in helping to shape and provoke and move us all. Specifically, I know the engineering quad has been so impacted by this edition. And now that students and faculty and staff are back on campus in person, I can only imagine the ways we'll all be inspired. I believe art holds both the possibility and responsibility to challenge us. To me, the most meaningful works are ones that I would describe as haunting, not in the scary or creepy way, but in the way that a profound work of art stays with you. It lingers, it mingles with your thoughts and ideas, it awakens, it haunts. I remember I was in college the first time I experienced a work that way. There was an Anne Hamilton installation in our museum, and to this day I get the chills when I think about it. It had such a meaningful impact on me and has stayed with me all these years. Partially because of the sensorial nature of the piece. It was unlike anything I had ever experienced before. I also felt this deep knowing and connection to the themes of the project, and there were things I wanted to understand better about myself through my own work. But mostly, it was this overwhelming feeling that the artist had created something totally new and evocative that felt both immediate and primordial. I believe Alicja Kwade has accomplished a similar feat here with this stunning artwork, one that we luckily get to chat a bit more about today. And I'm so incredibly grateful to have two amazing alumni here with me to share with you a bit about our committee process and how this extraordinary work came to be. So I will pass it over to Ann and Sophia for their introductions before we kick off a conversation about Pars Pro Toto.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Ann. I'm an alum, and I graduated 2 years ago in 2019. At Stanford, I was in the architectural design program within the School of Engineering. But I also did a minor in art history and grew up with a lot of art, so I've always considered myself to be sort of at this intersection of art and engineering. And I just love to think about how the two come together, and I get to blend the two to some extent to this day. I work as an architectural designer up in San Francisco now.
Hi, everybody. My name is Sophia Pink. Like Ann, I also graduated in 2019. I was in the product design program, which is kind of associated with mechanical engineering, and then I stayed for a little bit longer to do a master's degree in Mgmt Science Engineering. And yeah, I think like Ann, during my undergrad especially, I did a lot of engineering work, but also was in the design program, so I thought a lot about kind of experiences and design and things like that. So I was really excited to be on this committee and excited to talk about it with all of you today.
Thank you both. Sophia, I'm wondering if you could give a little context about our committee, kind of like pulling back the curtain on the process of what it was like.
Yeah, sure. So you might say, why have a committee decide this? Why not just have a few people who know a lot about art, make the decision? It might be more efficient. But I think this committee was really interesting and important because, like Dean Whittham said earlier, is that it gathered perspectives from all kinds of people who use the engineering quad and have some relationship to engineering and art on campus. There were professors on the committee, staff, undergraduates like us, all of whom had, interacted with the engineering quad, had classes here, had offices here, and all could kind of provide a different view on, what the quad, how the quad would benefit from some form of public art. And I think what was also interesting about this committee was that it was really just created for this purpose. Not everybody had a lot of experience, expertise in contemporary public artists or anything like that, but we could all bring different views of how, students who walk to class would, interact with art pieces, how faculty of offices here would interact with art pieces. And yeah, so we were able to bring a lot of views. Like Anna and I walked around the engineering quad and asked undergraduates, grad students, whoever we saw, what they thought of the quad, how they thought it could or couldn't benefit from public art. And so you're able to bring all these views to make this decision.
Awesome. Could you share a bit about our process? So something that stood out to me was how democratic the process was. I wonder if you could speak to that a little bit.
Yeah, so it was definitely very democratic. We all gathered together and had a discussion about what types of artists, what types of artwork we thought would fit this quad really well. And then we were lucky enough to get to the chance to look at portfolios and biographies of 13 different public artists who are working today. And this was just an amazing education in all the incredible work that artists from all over the world are doing today. And then it was very democratic. We voted for our top three artists that we would like to see more from. And then we were lucky enough to end up hiring 4 of those artists to develop proposals for what they would do for the engineering quad. And then we chose from those 4.
Wonderful. We were also really fortunate to have the amazing Sabrina Buell on our team. She and her art advisory team were the linchpin of our committee. I'm wondering, Anne, could you share a little bit about the role they played in our process?
Yeah, so Sabrina Buell, we were really fortunate to have her involvement throughout this process. And I really credit her and her team for making this process as enjoyable and educational as it was for the rest of us on the committee. So she is also a Stanford alum, and she now works as an art advisor in San Francisco. And she's just very well-connected and knowledgeable about the art world. So through her, our committee was able to be connected to these 13 incredible artists that Sophia was describing. We were able to communicate to them the criteria that we as a committee had established for this piece. And we were also able to meet some of the artists who actually visited campus in preparation for their proposals. But yeah, one thing I think needs to be emphasized here is that these are all really incredible, well-established contemporary artists. And for me, it was just so exciting because some of them I had admired before for their work. Others, I was really excited to learn about for the first time through this process. But what was so great is that these are all artists whose works I'm sure many of us have seen, behind glass cases in contemporary art institutions. And yet here they were, so eager to work with Stanford and to contribute to the look of our campus. So it was really such an incredible thing.
It was so cool.
Yeah, really cool.
We'll share a little bit more about that soon, but I wonder if you could share a little bit about the criteria that our committee established for the process.
Yeah, so as a committee, we had a number of discussions at the beginning of this process to establish what we all agreed would be really important for this piece to capture. And so these discussions, also included the more practical and logistical considerations, such as whether it would be one large object or multiple smaller pieces, whether it would be a permanent fixture or a series of temporary installations, whether it was something where we can ensure, it was safe for everyone to view and enjoy. But we also had a number of discussions on the importance of expanding the representation of artists within Stanford's collection. And Stanford has a really fantastic art collection, but we also recognize that much of the existing collection was made up of works by a lot of white male artists based in the US. And so we wanted to make sure that we were also considering works by female artists and artists of other nationalities and identities as well. But I would say that a lot of our discussions were actually revolving mostly on how to make this piece a landmark. And we really wanted to make the engineering quad more of a destination, even for people who weren't, taking classes here or working here, and, sort of as Dean Widom noted in her introductory remarks. And so we talked a lot about how great it would be if this piece can somehow become a part of like the campus tour guides routes that they bring people, their visitors to, or if it could become like this very identifiable landmark for students to meet at. And so one way that we thought that this can be achieved was by making sure that this piece was something that was very engaging and interactive, and and this could have been that it maybe had a very tactile quality that invited you to touch it, or whether it was that it could be experienced in a different way when you look at it from different angles or at different times of day. One example of a work that was referenced a couple of times throughout these discussions was Anish Kapoor's Cloudgate, which is better known as the Chicago Bean. And we thought that that was a piece that seems to invite so much engagement and is providing just endless entertainment for visitors who are visiting Chicago. It's a must-see spot for anyone's first time to that city. And so we also wanted this piece to be something that would continue to draw people to our quad. But another thing, though, was we wanted to balance that with making sure that this was a piece that would age well over time, and particularly considering the perspective of people who work in this quad every single day, because we recognize that there's a difference between art to visit and art to live with. And so we didn't want the people who have to see this piece every single day to get tired of seeing it or anything like that. If anything, we wanted it to maybe just color their day a little bit, brighten it up a little, or invite a moment of reflection or inspiration. And these are things that we hope this piece does and will continue to do. Yeah, those are some of the many considerations that we were balancing in selecting this.
It will age well over the next million years, basically.
Yeah,
let's hope. We were presented with so many amazing artists and works, and I was thinking something that might be interesting for the audience to hear about is how we made the final decision. Sophia, could you share a bit about that?
Yeah, so it was a really tough decision. We were lucky enough to see proposals from 4 different artists, so mock-ups of 4 different kind of versions of what the quad could look like. And they were all very different. We had one that was like a giant kind of swing that people would interact with. We had ones that spread out throughout the quad, ones that focus on one location. But we really thought about the criteria that Ann just talked about would this be considered a landmark? Would this be something that lasts and doesn't, that you would want to see every day when you go into work, when you go into school? Would this logistically work in the quad? And we all ranked our top proposals, and this was the one that came out on top.
Yeah. I know that we're all deeply passionate about art, and I love discovering new artists, and there were so many amazing aspects of being on this committee, but one of the great privileges was the unbelievable education we received. I feel like in the process of this, I was exposed to so many new artists, and not only work that I hadn't encountered before, but we got this rare and incredible intimate glimpse into their processes that was so inspiring. For us, finding the right artist and creating the most resonant piece for the SEQ was such a driving force in our whole process. And prior to the installation of Pars Pro Toto, when you would look at the campus map of artwork, there was this void in the SEQ and this part of campus. While it's very beautiful here, it had this kind of hardness and sterility to it, it felt transactional and kind of isolated. And for many students, it was associated with stress and complicated piece sets. So the committee was really looking for an artwork that could inspire creativity, but also really offer some mental health benefits too. A piece that could soften the space and offer tactility, as Ann was saying, or extend perspective or sense of play and joy in service of well-being and wonderment. And really, I think at the heart of it is we were hoping for a piece that could really instill a sense of place in the SEQ. And I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about that idea.
Yeah, I mean, I love this question, and I have a lot of different thoughts on this. But one way I think it creates a sense of place is by establishing itself as a, as a landmark, which we've mentioned a couple times. But maybe it's more of a series of landmarks, I guess, given the nature of this piece. I would say that the scale of the quad and sort of the spaces contained within it were previously dictated by, the size of the buildings. And the quad itself, I think, kind of sits almost like in a canyon, I guess, surrounded by these taller structures. And so what I feel like these marbles do is help break up that ground plane and kind of bring it down to a little bit more of a human scale. And so students can now, say things like, oh, let's meet up at that, at the blue marble, or at the, the paired central two marbles, or, whatever the nicknames are that they bestow onto these stones. But on an even grander scale, I think these marbles help provide a very simple but elegant intervention to the more formal organization of campus as a whole. So as a student of architectural history, I actually got to study the original campus plan for Stanford, which was designed by Frederick Law Olmsted. And he's most known for his planning of Central Park in New York, but he also designed our master plan here. And he designed it so that the academic quads all were organized on this very rectilinear, almost like monumental axes, I guess. And you still see vestiges of this to this day, with how our engineering quad here connects to the main quad and then all the way down to Green Library, and how you have Palm Drive leading to the Oval and culminating at Mgmt. And this is all part of his grand vision. But then again, there is quite a bit of hardness to that, and I think Professor Lowe also alluded to this in his remarks. But I think these marbles kind of intervene in a way that's still respectful of this original plan, but that just adds a little bit more softness and kind of randomness, I guess. And then I guess kind of related to that as well, in the similar vein of breaking up this rigidity, I think these marbles help reaffirm a sense of place, I guess, in that it kind of visually reinstates what I think the engineering quad is really about. There's so much creativity and ingenuity concentrated here. But as Amy was saying, when we collected student feedback prior to the selection of this piece, we were finding that a lot of people were associating this place with stress and using words kind of like monotone or almost like too pristine to describe our quad. And so I think these marbles add a little bit more color and kind of a richness to the quad that better reflects, all the creative and innovative thinking that's actually taking place, behind these walls.
And humanity. I feel like I've heard many people refer to them almost like as a family, like meet at the baby marble, or
right.
It has a sense of scale and a humanity to it that I think is really rich too. Sophia, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit about the importance of public art on college campuses.
Yeah, sure. So I think that one of the purposes of universities, of colleges, is to expose people to new ideas, new ways of thinking about the world, new perspectives, and we do that mostly through classes, through research, through bringing people from all over the world together to a place like Stanford. But I think our environment, and especially public art, can really do this too. And seeing different art pieces like this one and like others that I'm sure you've seen around campus can really make people think in a different way, think about their ideas in a different way, and that can have a big impact on people's kind of day-to-day life. I think the second thing is that public art on campus can sometimes act as kind of an interruption, like a positive interruption to the day-to-day routine. I know when I was a freshman and sophomore at Stanford, I lived really close to this Mark de Severo sculpture. It's this large red sculpture. You might have seen it. It's on the other side of campus. And I felt like, when after a day of classes and meetings and lots of work, it was nice to see that. And it was almost like a mini kind of break or interruption. You'd see kids playing on it. You'd see people kind of change the way they're looking around, change the way they're looking at their environment because they saw this piece. So I think those are two benefits I see from having public art on college campuses.
Totally. I have many photographs of my daughter climbing on that. Maybe that's terrible to say, climbing on that sculpture and playing on it. And I think too, like, those are such beautiful memories, and already so many moments and kind of like snapshots in my mind of walking with students or friends through this amazing piece, and the questions and the curiosity, and it just has such a memorable quality to it. So it was interesting because we got to see the rendering of this, and then it's here. So I'm wondering, like, now that it's here, what do you think about it? What do you feel about it? Like, what are your takeaways, and maybe what, if anything, surprised you about the piece?
Yeah, so I have, I guess, two kind of distinct thoughts on this. First, I think now that you get to see these pieces and just the intricacy of the stones, I actually find it, it's just so amazing to think about how these stones are just formed over eons, and they're, little snippets of Earth's history, I suppose, as Professor Lowe was describing them as. And so I actually find it to be quite humbling to just realize how, tiny we are, just relative to just these vast spans of geological time in which these stones are formed. But I guess now that I've seen this piece installed, I just find that it's so fitting for the space, and I think that's wonderful that it's now providing this very colorful, welcoming backdrop for the return of campus life this fall as well. I was on campus maybe about a month ago around lunchtime and got to witness this really fantastic scene of, Coupa was busy, there was a long line out the door for its lunchtime rush. Students and class, friends who hadn't seen each other in person throughout the entirety of the pandemic were reuniting. Bike traffic was back for the first time in over a year. And then, I felt like these stones were just providing this additional dimension of liveliness to this entire scene. And to me, it just feels like they've just almost been around for so long. They feel so good in this space, I guess, that I think it would definitely leave a void if they were ever to be removed.
Yeah, so for me, there were three things that stuck out to me when I first saw this piece in person. One was this piece really makes you feel a sense of awe, so a sense of disbelief, a sense of vastness, a sense that you're kind of a small part of something bigger. And awe is a really powerful feeling. There's research actually done here at Stanford that shows that awe can make people feel like they have more time available to them, more likely to give their time to help others, and even in some circumstances have greater life satisfaction. I think we often forget about this feeling of awe, but this piece really, I think, makes me feel that. The second thing I find really impactful about this piece is that it reminds us of the power of randomness. So the locations of the stones were determined by throwing marbles out and seeing where they land. And I think it's really easy to forget about the role that randomness plays in our lives, and especially it's hard for those of us who have backgrounds in engineering to think about the role of randomness and remember the role of randomness and that we can't control everything. So I think this piece really makes us respect the role that chance plays in our lives, and while we can control some things, we can't control everything. And I think the third thing about this piece, which has been alluded to before, is that it really connects us to across both time and space. So it connects us to the rest of the world where these stones are all from. It connects us across time because, as we heard, the origin of these stones, is spread out across time. And I think it's great to be reminded of that what we're doing here at Stanford on the engineering quad is impacted by what's happened, in other places in the world and in the past, and what we do here can have an impact on the future and on other parts of the world. So I think those three things are what really stuck out to me when I first saw this piece in person.
Awesome. Thank you both for such beautiful reflections and for your perspectives.